Hello and welcome to this Astranti video. Today, we'll be walking you through the industry analysis for your management case study pre-seen. In the next hour or so, we'll walk you through everything you need to know about the tea industry for your MCS exam. We'll give you an idea of the market, the current state of the industry, and a whole range of issues which could really help you in your exam. So why don't you now grab a cup of tea and get ready for this MCS industry analysis. Let's begin today by answering the question of what you can expect from this analysis. What's the point of going through this industry? Well, let's take a look at what the examiners said in the examiner's report. The examiners themselves say that an awareness of the industry that your business operates in will help you think of the wider issues that might impact the decisions on which you might be asked to comment on. In short, they're saying, if you have this background knowledge and information at your fingertips about the industry, where relevant, you can quote it in the exam, putting you at an advantage. The examiners expect you to have an excellent knowledge of the pre-seen industry. After all, you've had several weeks to get to grips with it, and they really want you to demonstrate this in the exam. Now, you'll have learnt a lot of theory for your objective test exams, but this exam isn't supposed to test your theoretical knowledge. The whole point of the case study exam is to test your application in the real world of your knowledge. It's not about knowing every single model and theory, it's about how you can apply the things you've learnt in the real world. And that's the whole point of this guide. We want to help you meet that expectation to really help you in your exam. So, what are you expected to do in the exam? Well, you're not exactly going to be yourself. And if you've done the OCS before, you'll be familiar with this concept. You'll be an employee of Piping's head office. In this instance, you're the financial manager at Piping's head office. And it's your responsibility to advise and report to Chana de Silva, the senior financial manager. In the exam, it'll be your role to provide logical business advice, as if you were actually an employee of Piping's Beverages. Therefore, it's no surprise that you need to know this industry inside out, because for the duration of the exam, you're effectively an employee of a tea company. And if you know the issues affecting the tea industry in the real world, you'll be in a perfect position to pass this exam. In this industry analysis, we've done all the hard work for you. We've scoured the web, looked at journals, magazines and articles to find the most relevant information for you to help you pass your exam. But where do you come in? When it's relevant in the exam, you can use some of the things you've learnt today to show that you've got an expert knowledge of the industry. So, without further ado, let's begin this MCS industry analysis. Now, we're going to begin our analysis by giving you a brief introduction to the tea industry. This is mainly to give you a bit of context, a bit of history to the industry we'll be looking at, because I imagine many of you will have made cups of tea without really thinking about the history or where they come from. Starting with the basics, as hopefully you already know, tea is made by pouring boiling water onto the tea leaves. Technically, this plant is known as Camellia sinensis, but for the duration, I think I'll just call it a tea plant. It's a bit less of a mouthful. And it's safe to say this plant and this drink changed the course of history. From its origins in ancient China, it became one of the world's most popular drinks. It was a drink which drove empires and civilizations for hundreds and thousands of years, and remains an embedded part of many cultures today. In the modern day market, which we'll explore later on, there is a huge range of tea products, in a range of flavours and ingredients, beyond the standard black or green tea, which became so popular throughout history. So, let's now take a dive in and look at the history of tea. It's commonly believed that tea originated in ancient China. There's a bit of debate about when exactly it started. There's some evidence saying it was first drunk in the 2nd century BC, but really we can't say for sure. But what we do know is in that the 6th century we saw the introduction of tea to Japan by Buddhist monks, helping it play a significant role in Asian culture. So from its humble origins, it soon spread throughout Asia. But what about tea in Europe? Well, we know that tea became integrated into European life during the 16th and 17th centuries. This was driven by explorers and travellers tasting tea in the East and then bringing it back home to Europe. For example, we know of Giovanni Battista Ramusio, whose voyages helped integrate tea into the European market. Those of you watching in the UK will know that tea is a hugely popular drink in England. And for this we've got the wife of the Merry Monarch Charles II, Catherine of Braganza, to thank for this, as she helped introduce it into the British market. During the 18th and 19th centuries, tea was an expensive luxury in England. However, because it was so highly taxed, tea smuggling became common. And it was estimated that by the end of the 18th century, £7 million of tea were illegally smuggled into Britain. As a result, the youngest Prime Minister the UK has ever had, William Pitt the Younger, slashed tea tax from 119% to a mere 12.5%, helping to cement tea in its rightful place as Britain's national drink. It wasn't all plain sailing for tea, however. During the 19th century, the majority of British tea was imported from China, who held a monopoly on tea. However, this monopoly was broken following the First Opium War, and the British desire to break this Chinese monopoly. As a result, Britain turned to cheaper imports from colonies such as India, which ultimately led to a rocketing in tea consumption in Britain. Moving into the 20th and 21st centuries, the big story is the rise of the tea bag. These came into the British market in the 1950s and the 1960s by Tetley. And by the early 21st century, 96% of the British tea market was in tea bag sales. During the 20th century, most of the tea bought by tea companies was done at auction. And during its day, the London Tea Auction served as the centre of the world's tea industry until its decline at the latter part of the 20th century. So that's a whistle-stop tour of tea. There are so many more exciting stories we could tell, but this is what we think could help you in your exam. But why'd we say this? Well, don't worry, you won't be tested on Pitt the Younger or the Opium Wars. But some of this information can help you put piping and the tea market in its historical and international context. We know that piping was founded in 1852, just after the Opium War, when China's monopoly was beginning to wane. Now, we don't have lots of information about Northlandia, but it does feel rather similar to the UK. Northlandia and the UK are both countries which can't produce tea, they have to import it, but they've become an established part of the culture. Tea is the British national drink, and tea is also an essential part of Northlandian culture. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that Northlandia is broadly comparable to the UK in terms of its tea history and culture. We see that the history of tea is truly international. From its humble origins in China, it went all around the world and is embedded in many cultures and nations. From Japan in the east to Britain in the west, and has even become embedded in places such as Turkey and the United States. Northlandia has also seen the rise of tea bags. It was piping who introduced tea bags to Northlandia at a similar time as when they were introduced to the UK market. An overwhelming majority of piping's revenues come exactly from tea bag sales as opposed to loose leaf tea. Now this again is broadly comparable with the UK market, where the overwhelming majority of people drink tea from tea bags, but this is something we'll be looking at a bit more later on. And finally, one final point to note is that piping makes use of the traditional method of purchasing tea, that is, through tea auctions. However, this has come a long way since the days of the London Tea Auction House. Piping, as we know, purchases tea in the country of origin and uses online programs to help them pick the best auctions to attend. So you now have a better idea of the history and context in which the tea industry finds itself today, and how this impacts piping and its operations. Let's now move on to have a look at some of the products and some of the types of tea which are out there on the markets today. So, starting off with types of tea. As I'm sure you're well aware now, having read the pre-scene, there are two main types of tea. There's black tea, which piping specialises in, which is an oxidised and stronger flavour of tea, which is particularly popular in the UK and Europe. You could think of organisations such as Yorkshire Tea or PG Tips, which specialises in this form of black tea. But there's also green tea. Now, the difference between green tea and black tea is that tea leaves don't go through the same withering and oxidation process as other types of tea. Now, we'll be looking a bit more at the production process later on, so don't worry too much now if you're not entirely sure what this means. This is drunk mainly in China and Asia, and it's considered to have a range of health benefits traditionally associated with Chinese and Indian medicines. Now, an example of a brand which you might have heard of if you're a fan of green tea is Akbar tea. Green tea can also come in various different forms such as Chinese Chunmi tea, Japanese Bancha, or Korean Ujeon green tea. White tea is tea which isn't rolled or oxidised during production and has a pale brown or yellowy colour in comparison with other types of tea. And a famous brand of white tea is Wysotsky tea. Keeping with the theme of colours, we also have yellow tea. This is a rarer and more expensive type of tea, and in the UK is sold by Whittards, which is a premium brand of tea. And again, there's not just one type of yellow tea. There's Chinese yellow tea and Korean yellow tea, which, as tea connoisseurs will tell you, is significantly different. We then move on to oolong tea, which is a traditional tea, especially popular in South China and Southeast Asia. In the UK, if you want oolong tea, Twinings would be the brand to go for. Again, there are various varieties of this, depending on which part of Asia the tea is grown. We also have fruit and herbal tea, which are made out of infusions. As you'll see later on, the range of different fruits and herbs which can flavour your tea has grown significantly in recent years, with organisations such as Puka being made which specialise in this fruit and herbal tea variety. A type of tea which is particularly popular in the US is iced or cold tea, where Lipton are the market leaders. I know this may sound strange to some of you, but they actually produce tea in bottles instead of teacups and tea bags. So, who would piping's direct competitors be? Now, we've covered some of these already. We've got those like Lipton, who are particularly strong in the US market, where iced tea in bottles tea is particularly strong. If we're looking for black tea competition, we've got people like Betty's and Taylors of Harrogate, who own Yorkshire Tea, and PG Tips and Twinings and Tetley, who all produce black tea who would compete with pipings. On the other hand, if you're looking for other types of tea products, such as green tea or herbal tea, we've got the likes of Puka or Whittards, or Akbar tea for green tea. We mentioned before that Wysotsky tea are strong in white tea. And then we've also got the likes of Taifu, right down there at the bottom, who produce a range of tea, coffee and hot chocolate. Now we can see that a lot of these organisations, they don't just produce one type of tea. They may specialise in a particular area, but we can see that they mostly have a range of products available for their consumers to buy. But what about the current product trends? Now, a type of tea which we haven't mentioned already is bubble tea. Now, bubble tea is a Taiwanese invention from the 1980s. It contains milk tea and tapioca pearls. Now, even though it's from the 1980s, it has only recently taken off in the UK and European markets. Particularly younger drinkers are a huge fan of its unique texture and the ability of this drink to come in a variety of different forms. We know that in the United States, the bubble tea industry was worth $2.4 billion in 2019. But this is only likely to grow. For example, if you ever visit London, you'll find that there are over 50 stores dedicated to selling this beverage. Bubble tea is becoming increasingly popular with younger drinkers looking for a perhaps trendy alternative to the traditional black tea. We also have loose leaf tea. Remember how we said earlier that tea can either be consumed through tea bags or through loose leaf tea. Now, at the start of the 2010s, it looked like loose leaf tea was on the way out. Just 2% of tea sales were from loose leaf tea. That's a bit of a tongue twister, loose leaf tea. Don't want to be saying that too often. And this was on a decline from 2009, so were loose leaf tea's days numbered? Well, not necessarily. A survey found that British tea drinkers in 2020 were beginning to drink more loose leaf tea. 24% of respondents said that their loose leaf tea consumption had increased throughout the year. And many prefer the taste of loose leaf tea to tea bag tea. Similarly to bubble tea, this is particularly common amongst the 25 to 35 age demographic, who may choose loose leaf tea to seek out alternatives from the common traditional tea drinking habits. They want something a little bit different. Okay, that's loose leaf tea done. I don't have to say that tongue twister for a while. Moving on. What's the state of play in terms of research and development? Now, the tea market is a very mature market and rarely sees fast-paced change. If you think of the technology market, that changes almost every month, whereas tea, less change. It's been around for a while. There's occasionally innovations, but there's never really radical changes. However, there is always room for improvement. This is becoming all the more important because of the rise of the coffee industry and the changing demands of the consumers. Now, what have we seen in recent years? We've seen the introduction of drones in the tea plant growing process. These can help water the plants, and it's an efficient way of reducing the use of water. For example, you don't need to have a massive sprinkler which sprinkles water everywhere. You can use the precision of drones to target where you want the plants to be watered. On the selling side, the British Co-op were the first business to introduce biodegradable tea bags to help combat the environmental damage of plastic tea bags. However, this has moved on. The British Co-op are no longer the only organisation using biodegradable tea bags. Now, if you look on the shop shelf, you'll find that most tea bag companies now use biodegradable tea bags in the footsteps of the British Co-op. We've also seen the development of tea subscription services, allowing people to sign up to have tea delivered to them and allowing them to pick a wide range of teas, ones which they may never have tasted before. This is so much more convenient for customers having tea delivered to them, rather than having to go down the shops and pick it off the shelves themselves. Now, coffee machines have been around for a while. If you're lucky enough, you may have one in your office or in your home. However, it's only relatively recently that the world's first automated tea machine was produced, and this was done by the tech firm Brew. This allows users to brew their perfect cup of tea, and they can even do this from their mobile phone. There's an app which allows them to pick the correct quantities and correct brewing time. Pretty much anything to do with the tea brewing process they can control from a tap on their phone. And this product is So, how does this all link with the pre-scene? Well, it's clear that the market is growing in other areas beyond traditional black tea. It's green tea and bubble tea where we're seeing the most growth in the tea market. And whilst it's probably true that people will always be drinking black tea, that's the sort of standard, safe go-to option, that's not where the growth is. Piping will struggle to appeal to a younger tea drinking market with black tea when they have the alternatives of bubble tea or herbal tea with the health benefits associated with that. However, we see that piping's emphasis on selling tea bag tea is very much in line with current trends in the industry. Whilst loose leaf tea and tea pods are slowly on the rise, there's still a long way to go before they replace tea bags as the go-to tea brewing option. But this does pose a potentially interesting possibility for pipings. Alliteration today. Pardon me. But they could expand into selling their own brand of coffee pods to expand its product range of black tea. These are all options available for piping. Turning to competitors. We know that piping is the established market leader for Northlandia. If you look in your pre-scene, you won't find any reference to the foreign black tea providers such as PG Tips or Yorkshire Tea. They're currently not operating in Northlandia. That means these don't provide significant competition for Piping's Northlandian sales. Piping has struggled to sell its products outside Northlandia because this is a very full market. If you look at the UK, there are so many providers of black tea, from Tetley to PG Tips to Yorkshire Tea. We could spend here all day listing off the various different providers you can see if you go into a supermarket looking for black tea. This is such a saturated market, so it's no wonder why Piping has struggled to sell its products outside Northlandia. So we're almost at the end of this video. It's now time to take a look at some real-life industry examples. Now, this analysis has given you a lot of useful information to use in your case study exam. And the easiest way to gain marks is to quote relevant industry examples and explain how what is happening in the industry is affecting the issues in your exam. And we've got time to go through 3 of these today. The first issue we'll consider is the fact that the US imposed a 15% tariff on Chinese tea back in 2019. This was part of the ongoing trade war between the two nations. This particularly hit businesses such as Harley & Sons Fine Tea, who also purchased aluminium packaging from China. They were already paying a 25% tariff on the packaging, so the 15% tariff on Chinese tea increased their costs even more. So, how does this relate to the pre-scene? All of Piping's tea is imported from abroad. Therefore, this will mean that Piping may see a rise in cost if the Northlandian government introduces tariffs from abroad. We don't know the state of the Northlandian government, we don't know if they're in a trade war with another country, but if they were, this would be an important issue for Northlandia. Furthermore, because Piping only gains a fraction of its income through exports, if Northlandia entered into a trade war with another country, if other countries put tariffs on Northlandian goods, this could cut Piping's revenue from exports even more. So the issues in which to use this example are in terms of exports, international trade, and how legislation, laws and regulation impact the business. So, how could you use this in an exam paragraph? You might be able to write something like this. At Piping, only a tiny amount of our revenue comes from overseas trade. When selling to countries with protectionist policies, such as those imposed by the US on China, we need to be aware that our own revenue from these sales will further decline. This, combined with the uncertainties associated with entering into a new market, means that to try and break into foreign markets could be a risky business. So you can see how relating real-life examples you can use these real-life examples and relate them back to piping. So that's our first one. What about another?
Now, while I've got your attention at the end of this video, I'd like to make you aware of the other products that Astranti sell as part of the case study course. So the first of these is a series of study text and tuition videos, and these come in two flavors. You have our written study text if you prefer learning through reading, or you can watch our videos if you're more of a visual learner. Now to start with, we have an exam technique study series, which breaks down how to succeed at various case study levels. We'll be looking at exam technique, writing style, and planning that you need to nail to be successful in your case study exams. And to accompany this, we also have a revision series dedicated to the theory side of things. This is because at the case study level, there is a large amount of theory you need to be capable of using in your case study exam. So what we've done here is we've taken the key areas of the theory from the 3 case study levels and condensed them into a series of chapters to help focus your revision. Moving away from the more generic products and onto the products that are specific to the case study pre-scene, the first of these is the pre-scene analysis video series. First and foremost, this contains a series of videos where we break down the relevant pre-scene at the appropriate level of the qualification, page by page. And throughout this video, we bring out all the key points that could be relevant for you in your exam, looking at various topics and things you might need to consider when revising for the case study. And then to supplement the pre-scene analysis, we also have 2 videos. We have the strategic analysis where we give a broad overview of what kind of strategy the pre-scene company is using and where it might be going in the future. And then we also look at the top 10 issues that we think this pre-scene company might be subject to and something that you may need to take into consideration when revising for the case study. We then provide an industry analysis document and accompanying video. CIMA like to see you demonstrate wider industry knowledge in your exam, and this is what this industry analysis does, as it gives you the wider industry knowledge you need in order to fulfill this requirement. Essentially what it is, it's a large document that we've compiled on all the relevant industry information that we have gathered so that you don't have to do the revision yourself. And then to accompany this, we of course have a video that goes over this document to pick out some of the key points for you if you'd prefer that. We also produce a number of mock exams for every sitting. We write 5 mock exams for the first exam sitting, and then we add 2 more supplementary mocks for the second exam sitting. We design these mocks around the specific issues relevant to the pre-scene and make them as close to the real thing as you will see in the case study exam as possible. So these are a great way to practice your exam technique and test your knowledge of the pre-scene company under timed conditions. And then to add value to this product, we also offer a marking and feedback service. So we have a range of highly skilled finance professionals working as freelance staff for us, and it is these staff that provide the marking and feedback service. So this is a great service to use in conjunction with our mock exams, as it gives you a great idea of how you're progressing in the areas you need to work on for your case study exam. And then if you're in need of extra exam practice, we also provide a more generic question pack product. So obviously there are only so many questions you could write about on a specific pre-scene. So what this question pack is a series of generic questions on generic scenarios that we come up with at Astranti, whereby we look to test specific topics that come up regularly in the case study exam. So if there is a particular topic you are struggling with and we've only tested once in our mocks, and you'd like more practice on it, then these question packs will be a great product for you to turn to. The penultimate product on this list is a product for those of you who would like to get a full overriding picture in terms of your revision all at once, and these are our masterclasses. So these are our expert tutors who hold 2 masterclasses every exam sitting, and these essentially cover all key aspects that you're going to need to know for your relevant exams. So from particular theories to analyses of the pre-scene, all the way through to tips and tricks you can use in your exam. And finally, such is the confidence we have in the quality of our product that if you do purchase a full course from us and you unfortunately do not pass your exam using our product, then we will offer what we call a pass guarantee. So if you did not pass your exam after purchasing our full course, then you will receive the materials for the next exam sitting free of charge. Okay, thank you very much for listening to that. I hope you find our products useful, and of course I would like to wish you the best of luck in your exam from everyone at Astranti. And if you want to follow us and get in contact with us concerning the case study or any other matter, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube.